Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our MISAT Bulletin. And we shall start with our headlines. South Sudan's warring sides agree to permanent ceasefire. Bolton visits Moscow to talk possible U.S.-Russia summit. And moving on to our details, starting with Africa. South Sudan's warring parties have agreed to a permanent ceasefire to take effect in 72 hours. South Sudan's government confirms the deal was signed after face-to-face talks between President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar in Sudan. Sudan's Sonna News Agency said the agreement also calls for the opening of corridors for humanitarian aid, the release of prisoners, and the withdrawal of forces. Moreover, the agreement calls on the African Union and East African Regional Bloc to provide forces to oversee the ceasefire. Noteworthy that tens of thousands have been killed in South Sudan's 5-year civil war. In Nigeria, more than 200 people died in weekend clashes in central Nigeria between farmers and herders after attacks by suspected militia herdsmen. The governor of Plateau State comments came late Tuesday during a visit by President Muhammadu Buhari after military, police, and counter-terror units were sent to end the bloodshed in one of the deadliest such confrontations this year. According to the president, the clashes began when about 100 cattle were rustled and some herders were killed. He also accused unnamed politicians of taking advantage of the chaos ahead of the elections, calling it incredibly unfortunate. On to illegal immigration profiles, the Prime Minister of Malta says that 8 EU countries will accept migrants from a humanitarian rescue ship that has been at sea for nearly a week. Joseph Muscat initially identified 8 countries during a press conference on Wednesday, which are France, Italy, Luxembourg, Portugal, Ireland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Malta. Muscat also said the migrants would be vetted in Malta to determine if they were eligible for refugee status or if they were purely economic migrants. He added that economic migrants would be returned to their countries of origin, while others will be distributed among the 8 countries. On the other side of the world, U.S. President Donald Trump's national security advisor traveled to Moscow on Wednesday for high-level meetings to lay the groundwork for a possible U.S.-Russia summit. John Bolton met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov for talks that reportedly lasted 2 hours, after which he headed to the Kremlin for a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that the discussions with Bolton focuses on international stability, regional problems, and the sorrowful state of our bilateral relations, while Lavrov has said previously that Moscow is ready for contacts. On the other side, U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and his Chinese counterpart struck a positive note as they sat down on Wednesday to tackle the thorny issue of how to get North Korea to fulfill a pledge to abandon its nuclear program. Mattis said he and Chinese Defense Minister opened discussions in Beijing with a very open and honest dialogue. The Chinese minister said the visit is important to increase strategic trust and enhance the cooperation between them. Meanwhile, in a later meeting, the Chinese president called relations between the militaries a model component of our overall bilateral relations, while Mattis said the U.S. assigned the same degree of importance to the relationship. And going to our economic news, European Council President Donald Tusk says the European Union must prepare for the worst due to the policies of U.S. President Donald Trump as a trade war looms between Washington and Brussels. In a letter to EU leaders on Wednesday, Tusk wrote that transatlantic relations are under immense pressure due to the policies of President Trump. Tusk said that unfortunately the divisions go beyond trade. It's worth mentioning that earlier this month, Trump slapped tariffs on imports of European steel and aluminium. The EU responded with rebalancing measures that hit around 2.8 billion euros worth of US products. And finally, global markets were subdued on Wednesday as jitters over trade conflicts between the world's largest economies lingered. Britain's FTSE 100 was up 0.3% at 7,559, while Germany's DAX edged up 0.1% to 12,250. France CAC 40 was 0.2% higher at 5,291. Futures augured losses on Wall Street as S&P futures dropped 0.4% and Dow futures declined 0.5%. In Asia, Chinese stocks were the biggest losers, with the Shanghai Composite Index sinking 1.1% to 813.18. The index is the worst performer this year, losing 14% since the start of this year. Moreover, Japan's Nikkei 225 fell 0.3% to 22,271.77. And before ending our news, let's take another look at the most important headlines for today. South Sudan's warring sides agreed to permanent ceasefire. Bolton visits Moscow to talk possible US-Russia summit. And this was the end of our Me-Side Bulletin for today. Thank you for watching.